Hi, I'm Abby. This is Abimackreads, and I haven't done a video in ages. I don't know what I'm doing. This is the first time I've done this in months, and I'm quite nervous, but I'm going to crack on with it. This beautiful library behind me is the Rampur Raza Library in Rampur, India, and it's very beautiful. And if you like the looks of it inside, you should Google to see what it looks like outside, because that is also amazing. Today I'm doing my part of the announcement for the Booktube Rereadathon 2020, and I'm mixing in my TBR as well, just to get two videos combined in one before the end of the year. You know, bosh, done it. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, the Booktube Rereadathon, the 2020 will be its third year. It started first with Michael at Catalyst Reads and Alex Black, the other host in this. She followed that, and obviously he can't do it anymore, so with his permission we took it up last year and we're continuing it this year. And it's an aim to read one book every month. There's a prompt every month to read one book for a total of 12 books in 2020. Now, you can read more than one book if you want that fits into that prompt. You can read as many as you can. And also, if the prompt is a bit too niche or a bit too hard for you to think of a book, just any old association with a prompt will do. It'll be fine. And this is mainly because we're doing this, and the reason I love doing this is because I love rereading books. But I never get myself to do it because there's always so many new ones on the shelf that I want to get to. So this is a fantastic opportunity to just reread some old books, some old favourites, and to have a kind of completion and game element to it as well. Right, let's get into my TBR. Okay, and just in case you were wondering why my t-shirt says "Oh Christmas," it's because there is a, let me put up the weight, there is a Christmas pizza on my t-shirt. I just thought you'd like to see that. Okay, so January's prompt is to reread a translated book or a book in which a character speaks more than one language. Now, I thought I was going to have trouble with this because the only translated books I've ever read are the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo books, and I don't feel like reading them again because I didn't enjoy them very much the first time. So I was thinking about what kind of book I can have where a character speaks more than one language, and I remembered that there are two like historical fiction books that are set in ancient Egypt that now and again have words from ancient Egypt, and that sounds ambiguous to fit into that prompt, but that is how flexible it can be when you get that prompt. Anything you can connect with it will work, and we'll answer yes, that is a valid book to read for this prompt. So the two books I will want to read for this prompt are Cleopatra's Daughter, which will appear somewhere, and Nefertiti by Michelle Moran. Now, I read these books a few years ago and I loved them. I'm obsessed, especially as a child, was obsessed with ancient Egypt. And Cleopatra's Daughter is my favourite of the two. It is about, as you can guess, Cleopatra's daughter after Cleopatra and, was it Antony? I think it was. Cleopatra and Antony. And they died famously, and it's about her being relocated into a new kind of palace with a new kind of regime and a new kind of pharaoh, and it's very interesting. I love the little details in it. I felt like I really was transported back into ancient Egyptian times. And the next one, Nefertiti, is about Nefertiti's sister mainly, and how Nefertiti marries into royalty and goes a bit manic and crazy and nearly absolutely destroys the kingdom. And again, very good book. February's prompt is to rediscover a book, one that you haven't read in a while, maybe 10 years, or maybe one that you've read in the past few years but can't remember any of it. And my first book for this prompt is The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. I loved this book, but what annoys me is that I tell people, oh my god, The Grapes of Wrath is such a great book, you've got to read it. And they're like, yeah, what's it like? And I'm like, I can't remember. All I can remember is that I loved it. And if I read it again, hopefully I'll have something more to back up my argument as to why more people should read that book. Obviously, it's a very famous book set in the Depression in America, with a family just trying to get by. It's beautifully written. I love John Steinbeck's writing. And I will look forward to reading that again. The second book that I haven't read in over 10 years now is Junk by Melvin Burgess. And you might not have ever heard of it. Not many people have. But it's my favourite book ever written. I stole it out of the school library when I was 14 because I just fell in love with it. It is about two teenagers in the 80s who run away to Bristol and become heroin addicts, which sounds bleak, and it is bleak. It's a bleak book, but it is absolutely full of just the most zany ideas and characters and this kind of justification that they're living. I mean, you have to read between the lines. They're telling you in every chapter, which is chapter by chapter, their voice, different voices in each chapter, how that they're living what they think is the best life they can live. But, you know, you can read between the lines and say they're sinking quite fast. They, you know, they turn into prostitution and things, and it's not the best life. And as a 14-year-old reading that, because it is a YA book, I just couldn't get over it. It was a kind of world or a kind of scenario that I was like a million miles away from, and I felt like it wasn't trying to hide anything to me. So that will remain my favourite book, and I cannot bloody wait to reread that. March's prompt is to reread a book that was written or set before you were born. Now, as I love historical fiction, that covers like loads of books that I have read, and I have the option to pick between loads of them. But the main one I'm going to go for is The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton. And I'm going for this because I tried to do it in 1919 in 2019 as the prompt for the same prompt, and I didn't get around to reading it, so I will try it again. And I hope it's as good as I thought it was, because I've been seeing a lot of people lately saying they don't like The Miniaturist, and I'm easily swayed by everyone else's opinion, so I'm hoping I'll like it just as much the second time around. In April, you are supposed to reread a book from a genre that you do not normally read from anymore. And I was thinking long and hard, because I seem to read from every genre, and then I realised I don't read much non-fiction. So I thought one of John Ronson's books, because he's a fantastic writer, about strange concepts that he dedicates his books to. And the one I am planning to read is So You Have Been Shamed. And it goes into how public shaming, as in how in the olden days where you were being punished, you were put in the stocks and the village would throw rotten vegetables at your head and stuff, and how that really hasn't changed. It's just that now you're shamed online, and like hundreds of people hurl abuse at you on Twitter and things. And it goes into stories and accounts of people who have been absolutely decimated on social media and things like that. And I can't remember very much of it at all, which is, you know, a blessing if you're going to reread it. You don't want to reread it if you can have a really good memory of exactly what happened. So that will be my April book. In May, you will reread a second chance book, something you DNFed or something you didn't like or had mixed feelings about. And I have picked Circe by Madeline Miller because I loved The Son of Achilles. I love Madeline Miller's writing, but when I read Circe, it just kind of fell flat for me. I just couldn't connect it. It didn't feel like one continuous story to me. It felt like a kind of compilation of shorter stories. So I'm going to give that one another go because it's very famous on Booktube, and I don't know, maybe I wasn't in the right place to read it the first time. Maybe I'll enjoy it better the second. Who knows? In June, the prompt is to reread a book that makes you laugh or gives you a positive emotion. And the book I have picked out is Parsnips Buttered by Joe Lycett. This is a book written by a British comedian, Joe Lycett, whom I love. And it is just a random kind of book of his kind of rants and anecdotes and really funny things. I remember reading it the first time round. Spencer Penguin had to go and have a colostomy, bless him. And I was in the waiting room and I was reading this book and everybody in the hospital was staring at me because I was laughing so hard and I couldn't stop. So I'm looking forward to reading that one again too, maybe in less of a public space this time. In July, the prompt is to reread a book that taught you something. Maybe taught you a lesson or some facts or anything that you can learn from a book. If you want to have read a book that has taught you anything at all and you want to reread it in July. And I'm going to be rereading Happy by Darren Brown, which actually is a brilliant book, but very intellectual, that goes into the actual nature of happiness. So it explores philosophy of happiness throughout the ages and kind of teaches you like how you can add those kind of philosophies to your own life maybe and find out what works for you and how to attain happiness. Or is happiness this thing we chase so hard? Is it even worth it? Is it already within ourselves? Raises a lot of questions. Very clever book. Can't wait to read it. Bosh. In August, you're supposed to reread a book that surprised you. It can be in terms of content, plot twists, or just your overall feelings. And I'm going to reread The Silver Linings Playbook by Matthew Quick. Basically because I was so surprised that it was nothing like the film. The film I felt was awful and the book I felt was great. And it also surprised me as there is a character in there, I can't remember the names of any of them, but the main guy who gets out of a mental hospital and comes home to live with his parents, and he meets a young woman. And to me, and to a lot of people I've spoken to, it seems like that woman seems to epitomise what it has to have BPD. And that was probably the earliest known reading of a character that I can identify with so hard in that book. So that's why I've picked that book. September, reread a book that was recommended to you or buddy read a book. Jane Eyre was a book that I was going to read last year. I never got around to it and I read something else instead. So because my mum recommended Jane Eyre to me, and it has got a special place in my heart because it was the first classic that I kind of read outside school and I loved it, and I was so glad that my mum, suggested I read it. For those of you who don't know, it's about a young governess who has a really hard start in life called Jane Eyre, and she goes to live as a kind of governess in Mr. Rochester's house, who is not a very nice character, and he's kind of her master. And she falls in love with him, but he has a big secret. You probably know what that big secret is, but I didn't when I first read this, and it really shocked me. So I'm hoping that I will get this. I won't get the same shock, obviously, because I know it, but I'm hoping it will still provoke the same feelings the next time around. For October, you reread a book set in a different culture, country, or world. And for that, I have picked 1,000 Splendid Suns, and I'm so sorry, I cannot remember the name of the guy that wrote it. That's a big fail on my part. For this same prompt in 2019, I read And the Mountains Echoed and The Kite Runner. So you know the guy because he wrote all three of these books. But I don't have 1,000 Splendid Suns because I lent it to my writing tutor who never gave it back. And I'm shocked. And I'm going to have to rebuy it again in October. and yeah, give it another go. November's prompt is to reread a underrated book. Now, I have picked East of Eden by John Steinbeck because I think when people think of John Steinbeck's books, they tend to go for Grapes of Wrath or Of Mice and Men, but I think East of Eden is just as good as both of them. It's not really easy to describe the plot because it is not just that much plot. It's more of a kind of family saga kind of thing that's set at the turn of the 20th century, and it's beautifully written, and there are just so many amazing characters in there, and you really get a sense of the time period that it's set in as well. So that is my book for November. In December, you are meant to reread a book that comforted you. Now, historical fiction comforts me. It is my comfort book to go to, is a historical fiction book. So I thought of my favourite historical fiction book ever, and I thought of Dark Fire by C.J. Sansom, which is the second in the series of the Shardlake books, which I'm always banning on about because I absolutely love the Shardlake books. C.J. Sansom is my favourite writer in the world, and Dark Fire is my favourite of the series. And it's basically about a lawyer called Matthew Shardlake who has an apprentice, Barak, and they are employed by Thomas Cromwell to find the details of this mysterious kind of liquid that is extremely explosive, and the kin wants it before anyone else gets their hands on it. And it's a kind of mystery that kind of goes throughout the book, so rich, deep in history, and C.J. Sansom really does his homework on it, so everything is so accurate in these books, and it really does will comfort me in December. In a year's time, it'll fly by. I'm getting so old to be reading this at this time next year, hopefully. Okie dokie, well, thank you very much for watching my announcement and TBR video. You can find me on Twitter at Abimackreads, and Facebook at facebook.com/Abimackreads. If you like this video, please put a thumbs up. Please comment if you're taking part in the rereadathon, or if you have any questions about the rereadathon, or if you have any comments about the books I'm reading, or if you have any comments in general, any comments at all, stuff them down there. I will read them and I will reply to them. All of my contact information will be in the description, along with the link to Alex Black's announcement video. And I think that's it from me. Goodbye.